What I do specifically is I'm a copywriter by trade, and I'm an associate creative director. So I work still in the weeds of writing copy, but also a little bit more higher level when it comes to brand strategy and positioning and how we're going to talk about the product, not just the clever lines that result from that.
So I've always believed copywriter is maybe one of the worst names for what it is you do. I think it's like one of the most mistitled position. Ironically, the group who could do a better name. What do you think good copywriting is, or what makes a good copywriter? Whether how much degree of writing is in there or not.
I would say knowing as much context as possible. So whether that's where the person who's receiving the message is physically, where they are mentally in the process of, the funnel, where this is going to reach them, just knowing all of that context. You can have a clever headline that's in a place when somebody's not ready to hear that message and it's not going to matter. Or you could have a show-stopping conceptual idea with an art director that isn't going to mean anything because somebody is at the conversion stage. It's not going to get their attention. So I would say knowing as much context as possible, which is part of the reason I like working at Native so much, is because I get to be involved in as much as possible, which gives me all that context.
Do you think it's possible to be a good copywriter without being strategic or conceptual?
I think it's good to be a good maybe headline writer, like just strictly a writer without those skill sets. I think what elevates somebody is having that strategic thought. But most writers I've met, unless you're let's say a technical writer, I'd say most other writers who I've met they already think like that, whether they're at a junior level or more of a senior level. They think through that strategy piece, even if they don't work with a strategist.
Yeah, it seems like almost like the shorter form you go, the more conceptual and strategic you have to be.
Yeah, there's no room to hide. With long form, you can kind of hide the fact me of all people, I know that you can ramble on. Whereas if you only have a few seconds to get somebody's attention, you better be hitting them with the message that it's weird because you want to disrupt their feed, but at the same time you want to hit them with a message that they're ready to hear in a way. So I think every copywriter I've met with, it's a scale thing too, because I've worked with junior writers who really they think through that stuff, maybe not at the level that like a senior writer would, but you have to. It's very tough to write in a vacuum. Like writing a banner ad without knowing what the landing page says is it's almost a fool's errand.
Yeah, so I came up through the design route, and you definitely know designers who are great decorators, but then there's ones who are like hit that next level of like that idea got communicated, right? And
yeah,
I guess the same thing could be true in copywriting. You could be a good writer, but I think as you go, it's the person who takes like that. I wanted them to do this, or we wanted to communicate this idea, and I did it in a concise way, or at the right moment that they're ready for it. Yeah, that's very tough to get to.
It is. I think as the industry is shifting into a more trackable model, I think it is revealing. It's very obviously revealing. There's a lot of great ideas out there. Do they sell more product? Do they push the needle? Do they build brand awareness? That in the past you could say, yeah, sure, because you can't really track it. Or you see sales go up and, well, that has to be because we ran these ads within these hours. And, in reality, there's so many other things at play. So when I made the transition to becoming a copywriter from account service, one of the discussions I had was with a guy who did the same exact thing. And he was a creative director at the time. And he said, never forget that you're a salesperson. And that is your job. And at the time, I don't think a lot of people were saying that. I'm not going to date myself, but it wasn't recent. So I guess I definitely hear what you're saying. I would agree to some extent that are you able to, because there is, ultimately, you want to be a salesperson, but at the same time, you want to tilt somebody's perspective and get them to think about something differently. So you can write, free with purchase, and that word is going to sell people for sure, the word free, but getting somebody to think about something differently and wonder and consider your product or your service as a solution is really, it's a balance, right? So if something's super highly conceptual, it could be too long of a walk for somebody to do the mental gymnastics to get there. So I'm seeing that a lot with, well, we want a social series and we want a concept, and that concept is going to be a little bit different than if it was a 360 campaign.
Yeah, and I think you also have to, the client has to be able to say, we're looking for incremental, reliable progress here that quickly shows up in analytics versus we need to make a big leap from where we were, or we're just so scattered, we don't have a foundation, we got to get that thing figured out. Those are different, right? Like the way you're going to write for those different situations will be different. But you're kind of touching on something now. There's a lot of debate in our industry about, is analytics ruining creativity? Obviously some people think so and feel threatened by it or are annoyed by the strength that it wields right now. There's others who say, it's get with the times. This is a new power and new feedback loop that we've got. We can make our writing better because of that. I mean, where do you sit on that, in that argument?
I think people have shown that it's just another obstacle is not the right word, but with every generation, really with almost every day, there's something new that you have to account for. And 10 years ago, people weren't writing for social media. And one could argue that that's killing creativity because if you're not catching somebody's attention in the amount of time keeps getting shorter and shorter, right? Started with like 3 seconds. Now it's 0.3. Maybe tomorrow it'll be 0.03. But as far as are analytics killing creativity, I think what analytics are killing is the long-term play. So the higher level brand awareness pieces, clients don't really have the patience for it because they know that they can get instant satisfaction and they can see instant numbers. And a lot of the most conceptual creative work, the ones that, the stuff that really sticks with you are at that higher level. And so a lot of the clients are skipping that and they're more in the mid to low with analytics. And so I think that is what's quote unquote killing creativity. But even that said, there's still so many ways to be creative and to craft something memorable that's going to stick within those lower funnels.
Yeah, I'm trying to decide if I agree if it's analytics that's killing that or people's impatience, and we're just losing. Impatience makes us less attentive. Impatience makes us want to have like instant gratification of results, and sometimes it is a hard sell for people to back up and like build a foundation that will lead to a much bigger gain. But they have to believe that it will, and I think everybody's scared. Everybody's scared to make a wrong move, right? And so they want to. What's a sure thing,
Well, because you can't hide in the analytics. Again, it's like everything's so out there, and if you make a wrong move, you immediately know it's the wrong move.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a decade ago, 2 decades ago, that wasn't the case. It was you make a wrong move and you don't quite see those numbers because you can measure if you post something and measure it over the course of a day. You can immediately see what happens versus if you're running a TV spot 20 years ago and see what happens to sales over a 3-month period.
Well, the other thing I think about when we talk about like how the industry is changing is that 10 years ago, I didn't hear people asking for messaging playbooks like they do today.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of that is because there's just more of everything, right? So there's more writing, which means there's more bad writing. There's more bad messaging out there, and then it's out there, and then people are like, "Oh, God, this is not on point." I'm not even sure what is on point anymore, and then we have to go kind of wrangle that for people. And then, I mean, you've led a lot of those presentations where you walk people through it, and they're just like, "Oh, where has this been?" So, to me, I think it's ironic that with all this analytics and things like that, we've also got these like really basic things like a messaging playbook, like what do you say first, second, and third, that are just like revolutionary to people right now.
Yeah. There's, the thing with the playbook is it could be seen as, well, we don't want to say the same message over and over and over again. The reality is that the person you're communicating to isn't going to see that message over and over and over again. You're just going to be saying it over and over and over again. So Coke may be tired of the color red, but it means Coke. People drinking Coke aren't tired of the color red. I guess the creatives working on Coke might be tired of the color red.
Right.
I've been in a situation like that where you work with one color and a lot of the same copy over and over, and it's easy to forget that is still going to resonate once you found something that works. And the trick is then how do you iterate on top of that?
Yeah, if you really have a strong position, it's going to get a little repetitive
Mm-hmm.
because you're trying to keep that position in people's minds. And yeah, it may get a little monotonous, but you can't just go away from it just because you don't feel like saying it. And you have to also realize that we're living with this every day. So people give us such a sliver of time to think about this.
Yeah. That's just a cop out for me to not have to write more copy.
Stick to the position.
Well,
stick to your guns, chums.
Yeah. I saw a banner ad the other day, and the thought was immediately, why do they even have copy here? Why do they even have a headline? I can't remember what it was. Let's say it was for Starbucks, and it had 2 Starbucks drinks up, and it was an offer. It was buy one, get one Starbucks free. And there was a headline that said something like, "Oh, this is sweet," or "have a sweet afternoon," or something. And it doesn't add anything. What does it add? I'd rather just lead with the offer. So there's this this hunger, this thirst for, like, everything has to say something, and everything has to be kind of cute, and everything has to, and the truth of it is that it doesn't. Sometimes you just need to communicate that there's a coupon offer. And sometimes you just need your brand tag and not a headline.
It's funny, years ago, we, before I was at Native, before Native was a thing, we did a campaign for the state of Colorado, and we just did the ad and just put quotes on either side, just let the photo speak. And then there's a logo at the bottom. And we felt like it said enough,
Yeah, I remember you telling me about that. And I think some clients would see that and call it repetitive, and like, it's not enough. Where in reality, if you're going to add a headline that's like uniquely Colorado, like, that doesn't add anything to that idea.
Right.
So yeah, it's interesting. And there's some people doing it well, and there's some who it seems like they're just checking boxes. And I think that's always been the case. It's just exacerbated now because there's so many more channels to do it. So at once you can be very targeted with how you're reaching your audience, and at the same time you still get organic social from a plumbing company. You're like, why are you on here? This isn't where
you have to be. You have to be. Well, everybody else is doing it.
In some cases. But when was the last time you followed a bank on social media? Not for work.
There's so much that is done in marketing that's because, well, I'm not a real marketer if I'm not doing all of these different things. And it's not an excuse to be lazy and only do a couple, but like, what's the thing that's going to work? Don't do it just because your friends are doing it. My gosh. I mean, treat the channel with a little disrespect. I mean, honestly, like, don't be so reverent with it too. I mean, do something a little bit different. And also, there's too much additive. It's like, what can we do more next year? It's like, what can we do less of? What is unnecessary? What can we strip away? I mean, that's where you find the good stuff, is when you just start stripping things away. And like you say, like, do we need this line in here? Oh, it's not doing anything. Just take it out. World would be a less cluttered place. You might have a little bit more attention if people did that.
Yeah, and that's where you can A/B test too. Is let's run some with offer led. Let's run some with a cute holiday line. But yeah,
it's a lesson that.
Huh?
It's a lesson that I am like continually having to learn the hard way. Of you put a lot of effort sometimes into something and it doesn't do well, and then this thing that you just quickly did, but it gets right to the point, and you're like, oh, why did that work? Like that.
Yeah, the challenge is to balance that with brand as well. So we could post let's say we have a bank client. Well, we could post cat videos that might get attention, but is it doing anything long term? Does it matter? I
To
don't
what
know.
end? Yeah.
Yeah. So that is maybe the answer is, yeah, just keep doing these short-term plays, and why not? And then once they're in the system, you build brand loyalty. But as far as brand equity goes, there's not a ton of building brand equity these days that I've seen. It's a lot of people jumping to those, let's make a TikTok joke type of
Well, it's
ad.
because I think it's because so many brands don't really have a true position. And
Mhm.
I mean, we've all inherited all these brand documents that say this is our positioning statement, and it's not a positioning statement and barely a value prop statement.
Yeah.
You never know what you're going to get. It's usually three
Mhm.
sentences that don't say anything. But um, years ago we came up with this like content checklist, and it was like 7 things that if most of these boxes are checked, it's probably going to do better. And then we added a few more. One of them that we added later on was like, does it support the brand position? Because if you're just doing stuff but it's
Mhm.
tearing that away or distracting from it, that's not good. And if you can't tell us what the brand position is, now we got bigger problems, right?
Yeah.
Like, what's the point of most of this?
Yeah.
And that, I think that became a really critical step to think about, because there's a lot of good ideas, but not everything supports like what you're trying to be to people.
Mhm. Yeah.
when
Most definitely.
you when you think about a typical week at Native, what are some of the things that you look forward to?
I oh man, this feels like a stock answer, but I really look forward to the projects that I get to collaborate with people on, or that I get to either be a sounding board or have a sounding board. So there's levels to collaboration. I'll work with an art director where we're concepting on something, or I'll work on something and then get to bounce it off a strategist. And I really enjoy those review sessions. I used to dread them, and I think the way that we do them at Native, I enjoy them a lot more. I think because I've seen the output after the fact, and I've personally learned not to hold things so close personally. um, but I just really like the that collaboration aspect, and it's something that I don't, in that regard, I don't feel like I've lost it with the the stay-at-home orders and the quarantining. So it is that back and forth with somebody, building upon something that's already been built.
Yeah, that's cool. I agree. I think that's chopping it up with somebody and seeing what might be possible and where they're coming with, and then taking that and doing something else with it. It's like
Yeah, I
about as good as it gets.
one of my favorite feelings is in the world is when something I thought of inspires somebody else to come up with something better. Sometimes you see it in a client meeting and that's a really good feeling, is when you pitch a concept and they're like, well, what if with this tactic and this channel that, we didn't even think about, they're like, what if we did this with that? And it fits within the concept. That feels really good. Doing it internally also. And then in those reviews, that happens a lot where I was kind of exploring this area and that triggers something in somebody's mind to either push it or to explore a different area. And that's always, that's brainstorm technique, but it's a good feeling, even if it's in an internal review, the much dreaded internal review.
No, I mean, that happened just yesterday. We were presenting something that was less creative, is more kind of like comms planning, but we said, hey, here's 3 options of how we could do this. And they're like, this option makes a ton of sense for these reasons. So I'm really glad you presented it this way. It's like we're working so hard to hear something like that from a client. They're
Yeah.
like, oh, this makes a lot of sense to this. This really helps us. We're like, oh, great.
Yeah.
So yeah, we live for that stuff.
I need the gratification. Yeah.
We are just needy people who will do a
Yep.
lot for some of that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I need the validation. Gratification is the wrong word, I guess. I need that validation.
So you've been with us for how long, Chris? Now it's coming. Where are we at?
About a year and a half.
Yeah, a year and a half is what I was thinking. I knew it was over a year, but I couldn't remember if it was getting close to 2 yet or not. But
April or so, I think is.
have you seen us? Have you seen us change in that year and a half that you've been here, or is it the same group that you joined year and a half? What's changed?
Well, in the physical sense, it's definitely a bigger group and
Mm.
more people. So there's been, back when we were in the office more regularly, it was getting more crowded. So that is the obvious sign of change. I think from a process standpoint, I've seen things evolve, things get better. Kind of that building upon um, notion that I was talking about, where there's this baseline or this foundation that was probably already building upon something else, that we keep moving it. A lot of times that's in response to what clients are looking for. And if a client responds in a certain way, 3, 4, 5 times, you get different clients responding in the same way, then it's probably a sign that you need to incorporate that into the overall process. So I've seen that change a lot. The inclusion of writers, I know I didn't see it before, but it sounded like it was a lot of freelance writers and a couple strategists in-house who know enough to be dangerous with a pencil. And so what I've seen has been including writers at all steps, really. I mean, myself, especially strategy. Even before that, before client kickoff, being involved with running the client kickoff workshops type of deal, down through positioning, being a sounding board throughout those strategy steps, and then having strategy be a sounding board for the art director and myself as we work through things. So just that acceptance of concept and where we're pushing the strategy department, I think just reiterates that even more. The benefit of having a concept, whether it's a brand concept or a campaign concept. I've really seen that evolve over the past, really even the past 6 months, but definitely the past year and a half into a place.
I 100% agree with that. I think from a writing standpoint, yes. Conceptual standpoint, yes. I think we made some really big gains there. I don't think it was bad before. It was always it was always in a strong place, but it just shows like how much stronger it is today.
Yeah, and I definitely didn't mean that as a let's pat the writers on the back, but I think it's from all angles. I think the strategists are thinking that way, the art directors are thinking that way, even the account people are starting to think that way, and you know, the other side of that too is the project managers have to account for that, and they have to you need to be able to show why it's needed and why it strengthens the overall project. And then even performance marketing, who sometimes they're like, let's just give me a headline. You know, being able to knowing when it's appropriate to push for a bigger concept or for something that's not just sales line, all across the board. And I think it ties directly into the positioning. It ties directly into the brief process. So it definitely has a spider web effect. And I've seen it just grow in a great way.
What do you think? What do you think clients hire us?
Man, I have no idea. They see my face. You know, oh, that guy. I don't know who he is, but
just magnetic.
He's wearing a hat. So I think it has to do with a few things. I think we showcase actual strategy. I think a lot of people say they have strategy or a planning department, and it's really low-hanging fruit stuff that we typically put in the parking lot or trash in the initial brainstorming and discussions of what a brand could be. I think we push past those, and I think people can see that in the work, whether it's literally in those deliverables or it's in the work that comes 5 steps later in brand presence and seeing a brand out in the world. I think you get that, which is pretty much a big agency deliverable, but you get it with a smaller, nimbler team. And so I've seen it happen before where the team that's involved with the pitch or that is involved with early talks throughout the RFP process, that's the team that's going to work on the account. So there are some folks dedicated to new business, but the day-to-day people are typically involved in that process. And so I think all of that just culminates in this I mean, if we do it right, we're making an impression that they're not getting from other places. It's, for lack of a better term, it's like best of both worlds. We're kind of smack dab in the middle. We've still got the nimbleness of a small agency, but we've got the thinking and the processes of a larger one.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think there's some people who see it as a sweet spot, and they're also the same ones that are like, don't change, like don't change at all, and like just preserve this thing. We're like, well, we're gonna make some change. We are gonna change, and they're like, don't change too much.
Yeah.
So, but I take that as a compliment, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's important. I mean, we were talking about it earlier that if we expect clients to, you don't need to add more and more and more. Sometimes you need to figure out how you do, I think it's important for us to keep that mindset as well. So, we have more writing projects. Does that mean we need 5 more writers? Probably not. How do we improve the processes that we currently have? So I think change is obviously good. It's just making sure that you're changing for the right reasons.
Right. I totally agree. So if you think about the past year and a half as well, are there stories that you are more likely to like tell friends or family from working here?
Definitely. Some just have to do with the clients as far as what kind of business they're in. Just entire economies that I didn't know existed. That, in dealing with some technological clients you come across where you're like, I didn't even know this was an industry. And then you get into it and you're like, oh, this is an enormous industry. And there's more personal stories, like the trip that we took to Poplar Bluff that is still one of my fondest memories of Native. And there wasn't even anything really stand out like a big moment. It was just an overall great experience from the group that went from Native side to the interactions we had with the client and the presentation, to the meal that we had with a smaller group. And so that's the type of thing that I really like. I mean, if you're gonna be in a business where it calls for you to be away from family sometimes overnight, it better be a good experience. And I've had those with Native.